On April 7th, 2021, speedrunning history was made.
8F. Oh my god! Yes! Yes, dude!
Super Mario Bros. Was completed in 4 minutes and 54.948 seconds by Niftsky. In the past, when assessing the Super Mario Bros. Speedrun's future, one could always dream that one day the next second barrier could be broken. Well, not this time. 454 is the perfect speedrun. At first glance, you may wonder if this speedrun is legitimate, why is it impressive, and why 454 is the final second break ever for this game. Let's answer all of those questions and more. This is the Super Mario Bros. World Record Speedrun Explained.
Also nice frame rule, by the way.
First of all, let's address the obvious. Niftsky is playing on an emulator with a keyboard. While this might not be the case for every game, Super Mario Bros. Emulation is accurate enough to be functionally indistinguishable from the NES and the Famicom. So while it's generally encouraged to play on original hardware, and while historically most top-level runners have opted for the NES or the Famicom, speedruns on emulators are fully legitimate and benefit from no advantage whatsoever. In fact, this is not the first time the world record was performed on an emulator. Also, the use of a keyboard is allowed so long as its configuration doesn't provide any advantage over official controllers. Specifically, left and right cannot be pressed at the same time on an original and modified controller, so this combination of keys is disabled. Also, buttons are bound to keys bijectively, which is to say each button is bound to a single key and vice versa. Finally, no unofficial feature like a turbo button can be used. This speedrun follows all the guidelines set by the Super Mario Bros. Speedrunning community moderators, so it is officially recognized as the world record. You may wonder why he waits on the title screen. This will make sense later.
Thanks for the good luck, Weird Champ 404.
This is the first major trick of the run, the Flagpole glitch. Normally, the flag has to go down before Mario jumps off, but this trick skips that animation. The flag comes down until it reaches this point, but an alternate condition was also programmed, although never used in normal play. If Mario reaches this height, the flag also stops moving down and Mario jumps off the pole. The flagpole base prevents that one from happening, so no matter where you grab the pole from, the flag will go all the way down. However, by clipping inside of it, it's possible to touch the flagpole and meet the alternate condition to stop the flag from going down at the same time, which typically saves about 20 frames. Since the game runs at just about 60 frames per second, this is a time save of 1/3 of a second. But how can Mario clip inside of the flagpole base? This happens because of the way the game handles wall collisions. Let's run through it step by step, which starts all the way back here. For the flagpole glitch to work, Mario's position needs to be within a very precise range that's about 1/4 of a pixel wide. Coming in from the pipe at full speed does not yield the correct position, so this precise setup is used. Land on the first pixel of the step with B released, press B when landing, and jump exactly 2 frames later. When Mario runs into a wall, for 1 frame he will actually run into the wall. Then his speed is set to 0 and he's pushed back outside of the wall. Mario's top speed is exactly 2.5 pixels per frame, which means he moves by 2 pixels on 1 frame and 3 pixels on the next. Because his position was carefully set up, he enters the flagpole base by 3 pixels. When that happens, the game has a harder time figuring out which direction is out of the wall. To solve this problem, it simply takes Mario's speed and pushes him the other way. But here, Niftsky taps left. So Mario enters the wall by 3 pixels, then his speed is set to 0. On the next frame, Mario first accelerates, which gives him a very small amount of speed to the left, but not enough to move by a pixel, so he's still 3 pixels in. Then, because the game isn't sure which direction is out of the wall, it looks at Mario's speed and sees that he's moving left. So it assumes that he ran into the wall from the right and pushes him to the right, pulling him further inside of the wall. The push is much larger than his speed to the left, so the result is a net movement to the right. In total, because he has to slow down on the stairs to set up his position, Flagpole glitch saves 15 frames over jumping directly to the top of the flagpole. But by doing this trick, Niftsky actually puts himself 21 frames ahead of an otherwise perfect 1-1. Where does the extra time come from? You guessed it, it's time to talk about frame rules. The game uses many different timers to regulate all sorts of systems. There are short timers for animations, the in-game timer, or even air bubbles when underwater. And there are long timers, like for the lifespan of a multi-coin block, the time remaining on the star, the invincibility period after taking damage, or the length of the black screen between levels. While short timers tick down on every frame, long timers are all regulated through a global 21 frame cycle. Therefore, long timers are always variable. Their length depends on the state of the global cycle when they were set. Enemies also make use of long timers, like the delay for a Koopa to wake up, the time between Podoboo jumps, or the time until a Hammer Bro starts charging at Mario. One of these enemies is the Star Flag, which sets the long timer at 6 when it's done coming out of the castle. So the game will wait however many frames are left in the global cycle, then 5 more complete cycles before going to the next level. As a result, no matter when exactly Mario finishes a stage, the game will always trigger a level transition on a multiple of 21 frames. This is known as the 21 frame rule, or simply the frame rule. Also, one frame rule is used as a shorthand for a multiple of 21 frames, or 0.35 seconds. Frame rules have deep ramifications in how Super Mario Bros. Is speedrun at the top level. They make the difference between the strategies that save time and the ones that don't. They allow some leniency in execution in some parts and brutally require absolute perfection in others. It all depends on how many frames of leeway Mario has to make the fastest possible cycle. In 1-1, the magic number is 3 frames, which leaves a little bit of wiggle room for the underground section to be almost perfect but not exactly perfect.
No way. I'm dreaming, right? I have to be dreaming. There's no way. There's no way I'm not dreaming right now. There's no way.
How did Mario not die when he touched the Piranha Plant? The reason is quite simple. Most enemies in Super Mario Bros. Have rather small hitboxes, but Piranha Plants have some of the smallest. It could be a mistake, but it is possibly an intentional feature made specifically to be more lenient towards the player. Here, even though the sprites visually overlap, the hitboxes actually don't. This trick is called the pipe clip. In a way, it works similarly to the wall clip for Flagpole glitch. There are 2 key differences though. First, Mario needs to jump lower than 2 blocks high, which can only be done at walking speed and by tapping A for one single frame. But since he's at walking speed, he can't get far enough into the wall in a single frame to be pulled in. Thankfully, there's one minute detail that allows it to be possible anyway. When Mario jumps up to a platform, as long as he's moving upwards, the corner won't stop his momentum. This is specifically to let him keep his speed even if he barely nicks the corner of a platform he jumps to. In this case though, because Mario jumps so low, he doesn't make it up onto the pipe. As soon as he no longer has upwards momentum, the wall starts pushing him again, at which point Nifsky presses left to be pulled in. This jump is a frame-perfect 1-frame A-tap, and Mario needs to be pulled in completely by the time he touches the ground. When Mario is inside of the wall and standing on a block, the game will push him out unless he's fully inside. In the case of Flagpole glitch, this is dealt with by jumping immediately as Mario touches the ground, but in this case, jumping is not an option. The extra airtime given by the jump arc lets him have enough time to be pulled in completely with perfect positioning. Once Mario is fully inside the wall, he can actually run to the right normally. Walls are made up of individual blocks that Mario can stand on. When he comes out though, he can't immediately go in the first pipe because the warp zone has not loaded yet. You can pause right now for a complete explanation of what happens if he does and why. The warp zone is loaded if the screen scrolls far enough to the right, which is why he has to take this detour. To make it back onto the pipe as fast as possible, Mario hits this pipe to stop his momentum, then accelerates backwards to the left. In this game, Mario accelerates faster in the direction opposite of which he's facing, so by facing right and moving left, he can save a significant amount of time. Nifsky also wants to jump exactly on the same frame that he lands, so Mario doesn't have time to turn around. But if you look closely, he jumps on the second frame, yet Mario doesn't turn around. This is because Nifsky presses both left and down. This gives him a very specific advantage. While Mario is airborne, the down press will do nothing, so he will accelerate to the left. But when he lands on the ground, the down press is prioritized over the left input, and so the left press will do nothing. So pressing down and left is a safety net that trades a little bit of speed for better acceleration. Jumping late still wastes a couple of frames, but because there are about 5 frames of leeway to make the fastest possible frame roll, it doesn't end up costing any time. Because of the extra detour to load the warp zone, this extremely difficult trick ends up saving only one single frame rule over the very easy alternative of going up and above.
8 for 12, that is 66%. Hogger. technically it's rounded to 67% because it's 66.66666666. So technically it rounds to 67%. 1% more. Let's go.
This flagpole glitch works exactly the same as the one in 1-1, even down to the position setup.
I don't remember the last time I unironically 5-parked.
This level has a lot to unpack. First, the wrong warp. This pipe should normally take Mario to this coin cache, but instead takes him to the warp zone, which the vine is supposed to do. This is because when multiple subworlds exist in a stage, the game tracks which one to send Mario to based on the screen's position. The point where the destination changes from the warp zone to the coin cache is here. By moving Mario further to the right on the screen than normal, it's possible to enter the pipe while the screen is still behind this point, which in turn saves the animation of the vine coming out on the other side and saves a few seconds. Moving Mario to the right is done with this wall clip. When the game pulls Mario to the right due to the wall collision, it does so without moving the screen. You can make Mario go all the way to the right edge of the screen this way, but since this is slower than running, Nifsky wants to move the smallest possible amount that's still enough to make the wrong warp work. Finally, this part has more to it than meets the eye. Hitting the vine block is crucial because it prevents the plant in this pipe from spawning. Super Mario Bros. Can load up to 6 objects at once. By the time the plant is to be loaded, the vine has not been unloaded yet and there are 6 loaded objects. So the plant is not loaded and the pipe is free for Mario to go in. But entering the pipe is no easy task either. The screen scrolls following Mario's movement, and when he goes down a pipe, the screen carries its momentum, which causes the wrong warp to fail. To avoid that, Mario needs to come to a complete stop first. Because he's already just barely far enough to the right to allow for the wrong warp to work, this leaves a tiny slice only a few pixels wide to come to a dead stop on. Once in the warp zone, the rest is fairly smooth cruising. Hitting the back wall seems slow, but it's actually just about the same speed as turning around as soon as possible and much easier.
3 for 3. Let's go, dude.
Right at the start of the level is a fast acceleration. Because Mario accelerates faster backwards, when done perfectly, it can be up to 2 frames faster to turn around and jump backwards. However, it's much easier said than done. On the first frame of gaining control, you need to tap left for a single frame, then press nothing for 1 frame, and then press right and tap A for 1 single frame. You can't jump any longer than that because Mario can only go from walking speed to running speed if he's on the ground and B is held. Jumping longer than a frame would cause Mario to be stuck at walking speed before landing, which goes against the purpose of accelerating faster. To set up for this flagpole glitch, Nifsky had to tweak his position yet again. But coincidentally, the 8-1 frame rule happens to line up in such a way that the fastest way to beat the level has 0 frames to spare. The adjustment has to be so small that it doesn't move Mario enough to lose a single frame over going full speed throughout the level. How small does it actually have to be though? While Mario's position and speed are calculated down to a precision of 1/16th of a pixel, a unit commonly called a subpixel. When displaying Mario, subpixels are rounded down, but they are always kept track of behind the scenes. In this case, Nifsky needs to adjust his subpixel position by 2 subpixels, or 1/8 of a pixel. He does this by holding down and right when landing and then walking off from this pipe. So for the very short time that Mario is walking on the pipe, the right input is overridden by the down input, making him slow down ever so slightly. However, because he jumped 1 frame later than he wanted to, he also landed 1 frame late on the pipe, so he slowed down by only 1 subpixel instead of 2. This was a problem. He recognized what happened and fixed it with the same method on this pillar, which got him his second subpixel of adjustment. At the end, Nifsky needed to make a frame-perfect 2-frame jump to land exactly in the right spot to perform Flagpole glitch. Usually, it's possible to jump 1 frame late into the flagpole and still get Flagpole glitch to work, but in this case, doing so would cause him to lose the frame rule, so this jump has to be frame perfect as well. There's no understating just how difficult this frame rule is to save. The sheer precision and complete lack of a margin for error makes this level absolutely brutal to complete as fast as he did.
We're 2 for 3 of plate 1. What is going on? Alright, just hit the Stassi 2. Holy cow.
This is called the bullet bill glitch, and here's how it works. The level ending sequence has 3 parts. First, the flag goes down until one of the 2 conditions are met. Then, Mario jumps off the flagpole and walks until he hits a solid block, usually this one. When he does, he's flipped to the background layer, which makes him disappear behind the castle, and the remaining time starts ticking down for points. Finally, the star flag comes out and counts 6 frame rules before transitioning to the next level. With the bullet bill glitch, Mario ends up inside the flagpole base because he's moving upwards thanks to the same corner mechanic as before. He's high enough to touch the flagpole and start the ending sequence, but not enough to snap up onto the block. Once he no longer has upwards momentum, he hits the block and gets ejected to the left. But also, because he hit a solid block, this immediately triggers the 3rd phase of the ending sequence, skipping not only the flag going down but also the walk to the castle and saving 2.5 seconds. A regular jump is way too high for this, so that's why it has to be done by bouncing off an enemy instead. The wait for the bullet to reach the flagpole cuts into the time save, so the actual gain is 3 frame rules or 1.05 seconds over finishing the level normally. Now those of you familiar with these speedruns know all about this glitch already, but this time it's actually different. This version of the bullet bill glitch is 1 frame rule faster than what has been done for 7 years, and here's how it's done. The bullet launcher fires at random intervals. But as it turns out, these intervals are not truly random. In short, the game runs a recursive random number generation function on every frame that always starts with the same input from power on. This in turn makes it go through the same sequence of numbers in the same order every time. So if an event calls for a random number to decide its outcome, it can be controlled by manipulating which frame the event happens on. In this case though, that's not enough. The cannon fires based on a timer that calls the random number for each open slot in the first 3 enemy slots. There are ways to change which ones of these slots are open without slowing down. So by loading the bullet bill launcher on a specific frame and by manipulating the enemy slots, it's possible to get the launcher to fire a bullet to the right as early as possible. Remember when Nifsky waited for an extra second on the title screen? This is why. In Super Mario Bros. Speedruns, timing officially starts on the frame where the time appears at the start of 1-1. Starting the run exactly 4.32 seconds after the game was powered on sets up the random number generation perfectly. But now that he gets to the bullet bill launcher on a specific frame, he also needs to set up the enemy slots correctly. This is done by doing a high jump on this step to prevent Lakitu from throwing a Spiny. The following Koopa will load in its place. Then, stomping this Koopa makes it turn around and start moving to the right, which makes it unload later than it would have otherwise. After that, Nifsky avoids every other enemy in the stage. This manipulation sets up the random number and the enemy slots perfectly so that the cannon fires exactly when it needs to. Another element that makes this extra frame rule possible is this pipe jump. Mario lands on the first pixel of the block, and 2 frame perfect jumps make it possible to get past the pipe with almost no slowdown at all. But all of this still isn't enough. The final detail that makes all of this work is the way he bounces on the bullet bill. Older methods used to bounce on the middle of the bullet, but here that would end up being too slow to get the fastest frame rule. Instead, Nifsky has to touch the bullet on the very front as early as possible. Here you can see that Mario goes through the bullet before stumping on it. This is because the game only handles collisions with objects every other frame. On this frame, the collision is not being checked. On the next frame, Mario stumps on the bullet bill. For bullet bill glitch to work, Mario needs to stomp on the bullet on the second frame so to not grab the flagpole. This frame parity issue, called the coin toss, used to cause half of bullet bill glitch attempts to fail, but it's actually no longer a problem here. This entire level has 0 frames to spare, so if the collision was handled on this frame instead, that means it was already too slow to begin with. On the other hand, this is why the setup had to be changed from a full jump from the middle of the stairs to a 3-frame jump from the top. While both allow Mario to stomp the bullet at the correct height, they do so on opposite frames. On any frame where the full jump succeeds, the 3-frame jump fails, and vice versa. This simply happens to be one where it's the 3-frame jump that works. As a final note, Nifsky also needed to adjust his subpixel position by 2 subpixels, which he did with 2 1-frame left taps while waiting for the bullet.
Latest split.
This level has a flagpole glitch that looks the same as 1-1 and 4-1, but it's actually a bit different because of 2 problems, subpixels and fireworks. An amount of fireworks equal to the last digit of the remaining time will go off after beating a stage at 4 different values, 1, 3, 6, and of course 0. 8-3 is the only level in the run where going full speed throughout lines up with the 3 over 6 and their time-wasting fireworks, so Nifsky has to slow down at some point. But he also needs to slow down in such a way that his subpixel position lines up correctly for Flagpole glitch to work. This frame-perfect jump is the key to both problems. With the full jump exactly here, Mario lands on the pipe at this spot. Then, all Nifsky has to do is release B at some point before landing and press it again once he's falling off. This will slow Mario down to a walking speed until he lands on the ground, which slows him down the right amount to finish with a 242 and set up his subpixel position nicely for Flagpole glitch. In 8-4, Framerules no longer dictate the pace of the run, because time stops when Mario touches the axe. Every frame counts from now on.
Come on, dude. Stay calm.
This plant mysteriously disappeared. What happened? Well, 8-4 is a maze level where you have to enter the correct pipes to move on. Until you enter a pipe, each room loops infinitely by resetting itself once the screen reaches a certain point. This unloads every enemy on screen, including piranha plants. In the first room, the reset point happens to be ahead of the pipe you need to take, so the plant is unloaded just before Mario is about to get hit by it. This jump is frame perfect. Nifsky can't jump before leaving the pipe because he needs to accelerate beyond the walking speed cap first, and he can't jump any later without bumping into the pipe. This is a wall jump. We've already seen how Mario can end up inside of a wall and stand on a block. If he's lined up correctly with the top of a block and he gets far enough into the wall, Mario can stand for one single frame during which Nifsky jumps. He also turns around to accelerate faster after the wall jump. A certain other speedrunning YouTuber told 2 million people and counting that wall jumps are pixel perfect.
That meant it had to be both a pixel perfect jump into the wall?
That's just a bag of lies. As a way to be more forgiving towards the player, if Mario is about to land on a block but is just barely too low, he will snap up onto the block. The vertical range to land on a block is 4 pixels. The horizontal range is 1.5 pixels. The furthest out where Mario can stand on the block is here. In the context of a wall, that's 2 pixels inside. But Mario moves by 2.5 pixels per frame, so he can be up to 3 pixels in. If that happens, the window to jump is 2 frames instead of only 1. Here though, Nifsky was only 2 pixels in, so the jump was frame perfect. This fast acceleration works the same as in 8-1, but it has an added benefit. Normally, when coming out of the pipe, Mario doesn't have enough time to reach running speed before he has to jump off. So he's forced to keep walking speed until he lands here. With a fast acceleration, he's able to reach running speed on the pipe instead, which saves up to 5 frames instead of only 2. Then he turns around and enters this pipe instead of jumping across to the correct one. The way this works is the inverse of the 4-2 rung warp, but it's essentially the same. The room Mario will be sent to when entering a pipe is updated when the screen reaches this point. It's faster to scroll the screen this far, then turn around and go back into this pipe than it is to keep going and enter the intended pipe, so that's what Nifsky does. He actually makes the screen scroll 1 pixel further than the absolute minimum required to go to the water section, which costs a couple of frames. But if he had been 1 pixel short instead, the whole run would have been ruined, so while he tried to aim for the pixel perfect turnaround, it's better to err on the side of caution here.
AD, I think.
For this part, Nifsky holds down right. While Mario is swimming, the right input is prioritized, and when he touches the ground, it's overridden by the down press. But why? The reason is quite simple. When Mario is on the ground underwater, he slows down to walking speed when holding right, and he gradually comes to a stop when holding nothing. Because he slows down instantly when holding right, when touching the ground for short spans, it's faster to hold down and right than it is to simply hold right. He also has to land in front of the pipe, otherwise he risks losing 6 frames or more.
Holy cow. Wait, what? 8F. Oh my god! Yes! Yes, dude! What? Oh my god! Oh my god!
Despite what his manually activated timer says, the final time of this run is 454.948. The final time is calculated without the shadow of a doubt thanks to Bowser's hammer patterns. Like every other random event in this game, Bowser's hammers are dictated by the random number generation function, which produces predictable outcomes based on the current frame. The pattern can be further manipulated by hitting the hammer bro early, late, or not at all. Nifsky knew what sort of patterns to expect, so he purposely let the hammer bro live to get an easier Bowser pattern to deal with. A comprehensive list of Bowser patterns was made for every possible frame for a range spanning over 5 minutes. To achieve this time, Nifsky stood on the shoulders of the giants that came before him.
That was it! I cannot believe it! Ever. 455! There it is! Oh my gosh, is it record?
Yes! World record! World record! World record!
Dude, I'm actually not even popping off that much.
He set a time that only 2 years ago was considered nearly impossible. But there's one question left to answer. Why is this speedrun perfect? The answer is very simple. It's not perfect. Nonetheless, it can still be said with near 100% confidence that 454 is the final destination of Super Mario Bros. Speedruns. 453 is almost undoubtedly impossible to achieve without somehow making a major discovery in a game that's been turned inside out for decades. We know this because of tool-assisted speedruns. If you don't know what the task is, please give this video a watch. Tool-assisted speedruns are often mislabeled as the perfect speedrun when they most often are not. In the case of Super Mario Bros. Though, the task very well might be the fastest playthrough of the game that is physically possible. It clocks in at 454.265. Now let's see what little time is left to be saved between the pinnacle of human achievement and absolute perfection. How much can each level be improved? 1-1? It can't. 1-2? No. 4-1? 8-1? Nope. 8-2? Nope. 8-3? Perfect as well. This leaves 2 levels, 4-2 and 8-4. In 4-2, the task is 1 frame rule faster than Nifsky's run. It does so thanks to the age-old bump strategy. When Mario bumps into a block, the screen stops scrolling for longer than Mario stops moving. This allows Mario to offset his position to the right by about 7 to 10 pixels on each bump. For the wrong warp to work, Mario needs to be off by a minimum of 20 pixels from his regular screen position, which leaves a single pixel to stop on the pipe and go to the warp zone. The task gets 2 10-pixel bumps and manages to reach the World 8 pipe with 5 frames to spare. But there are multiple issues that prevent this from being achievable by humans. First, the task does fast accelerations everywhere. Once at the start, once after each bump, 2 in a row in the warp zone, and 1 more on the pipes. Also, the walking speed trick is used in 2 places. When Mario lands from a jump and B is not being held, he will slow down to walking speed instantly instead of the gradual deceleration from releasing right or holding left. This trick is already being used in the common Flagpole glitch setup as well as the 8-3 slowdown to avoid fireworks. It can also be used on this pipe. The fastest way to stop or to change direction is to release B and land, then press left. The task combined this trick with subpixel manipulation to enter the pipe with a speed of 13 subpixels per frame without scrolling the screen in order to minimize the time spent slowing down. Finally, with one more walking speed trick, subpixel manipulation, and fast acceleration, this turnaround alone is faster by 4 frames over the conventional method. When combining everything, these minuscule additional time saves help shave off about 8 or 9 frames over what could realistically be performed by a human. So with this strategy, humans come up just a little bit short. There is, however, one alternate strategy that was recently developed. It requires a very rare 11 pixel bump off the elevator platform. The exact amount of displacement that a bump will give depends on many factors such as Mario's position, subpixel position, and speed, even down to the 16th of a subpixel per frame. The wall will push Mario a variable amount based on his position, and he'll be able to move to the right quicker if his subpixel position and speed are as high as possible. If everything lines up perfectly, an 11 pixel bump is possible. By combining this unicorn bump with a left-facing wall jump off the side of this pipe for another 9 pixel bump, a pixel-perfect stop to enter the warp zone, and a perfect fast acceleration in the warp zone, 4-2 can be completed on the fastest possible frame rule with a single frame to spare. This is all theoretical though, because while on paper it could be humanly possible, it's doubtful that anyone would be able to pull it off. It's impossible to understate just how incredibly precise and difficult—
Yes! 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 Oh my god! I did it! Let's freaking go!
As it turns out, Nifsky has done it once, in practice after thousands of attempts over half a year. Don't get me wrong, this is still orders of magnitude harder than any other frame rule in this game, but it is technically possible. The walking speed trick has also been used with modest amounts of consistency as well. It could potentially hold the key to making this frame rule attainable in full game runs. There are 20 frames left to match the task. They can be found in 8-4. Let's do a room-by-room breakdown of those frames. In the first room, a double fast acceleration saves 6 frames over Nifsky. The first one saves 5, the second one saves 1. Over the years, many people have practiced 8-4 by itself, trying to squeeze out every frame of time save. More recently, this practice has been even more refined, down to isolating each room. With this method of playing out a single room over and over, various runners have combined to match the task in every single room except for the first one, where 5 frames have been saved, but that 6th is still just out of reach for now. It's expected to be saved at some point in the near future. When that happens, we will be able to say that if we divide up the game to have 4-2 by itself and 8-4 into each individual room, humans will have combined to create the perfect speedrun over 8 different segments. For now though, 1 frame is left to save in this room. In the wall jump room, a fast acceleration can save 2 frames. The wall jump Nifsky did was optimal, but in order to get this optimal wall jump, he sacrificed 1 frame to set up his subpixels correctly. A perfect wall jump without this setup would save an additional frame for a total of 3 in this room. In the turnaround room, 2 frames could be saved with the frame-perfect fast acceleration. On top of that, 6 additional frames could be saved with the frame-perfect turnaround and fast acceleration to the left, which is possibly the second hardest time save in the run after 4-2. They combined for 8 frames in this room. The water room can be played frame-perfectly somewhat easily compared to the rest of the level. Nifsky lost 1 frame to touching the ground a little more than is minimally required. Finally, 1 more fast acceleration in the last room brings the total to 20 frames, 19 of which have been saved in practice before. And that's it. Beyond these 6800ths of a second, the Super Mario Bros. Speedrun can no longer be improved. As time goes on, this record will be broken. But as 8-4 gets squeezed until it's bone dry, each additional frame grows exponentially harder to save. The era of breaking barriers and setting milestones has come to an end, and yet somehow, the chase for perfection continues.